Chapter 1302. Clang, clang, clang. Amidst the clanging sounds of metal clashing against metal, numerous silver chains with different wedges at the front and golden light flowing all over moved nimbly in the air. In an instant, they formed an encirclement net, trapping Kiyoshi and Haruai Biao within. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding Komodo, quickly controlled the whirlwind to stop in the middle of the whistling wind. He floated in the air and looked around. The chains that came out from the golden ripples seemed to form a huge chain cage, trapping Juyuasuk and Kasumi inside. Hovering in the air, Haruai Hiroyuki was like a bird locked in a cage made of chains. He didn't know what to do. Under such circumstances, the voice that sounded like a laugh yet not a laugh sounded once again. "If that's the case, you won't be able to escape, right?" Hearing this voice, Kiyoshi and Haruai Biao raised their heads at the same time and looked in front of them. There, Noah seemed to be descending from the heavens. With a slow speed, he floated down bit by bit until he was at the same height as Kiyoshi Asuka and Haruai Biao. In the eyes of Kyu and Haruai Biao, who had become caged birds, that figure was simply synonymous with the Demon King. In fact, even though Noah wasn't like the Demon King in the box court who could use his authority as the organizer to force others into his game of bestowment, Kiyoshi and Haruhibu Yaichi were well aware of how frightening Noah was. They knew that Noah was definitely much more difficult to deal with than the Demon King. As for why, the reason was very simple. Even if it was a Demon King, if someone else found a way to defeat him, he could only die with regret. However, Noah, who had endless blessings and all of them were of the Godhead level, could use all kinds of blessings to deal with all kinds of situations. In other words, the man named Noah had no weaknesses. No matter what kind of methods his opponent used, this man would always be able to deal with them with endless gifts. He could even specifically target his opponent's weakness and take out the corresponding weapons and tools. Having such a person as an opponent was even worse than the Demon King. If it was 16 knights, perhaps he could use brute force to deal with the enemy. But Kiyoshi and Haruai Biao didn't have the strength to fight against 16 knights. At least, not now. Seeing Noah descending from the sky, Kiyoshi and Haruai Biao bit their lips at the same time and looked at Noah with resentment and regret. "I didn't expect there to be a traitor here. Betraying one's companions is an eternal sin." Seeing Kyuki Asuka and Haruhibu Yaichi talking as if everything was Noah's fault, Noah rolled his eyes. "Sorry, I don't think I'm a traitor," he said. "You call this not betraying me?" Joyuan Bird glared at Noah and said loudly. "Aren't we companions? In the sense of community, we are indeed companions." Noah's mouth twitched. "But, if you're referring to the companions who prank and cause trouble, then I'm sorry, but please don't count me in." "Ugh." Haruai Biao puffed up his cheeks. "You traitor. Am I really the villain now?" Noah rubbed his forehead, then looked up and said weakly. "Forget it, a villain is a villain then. Then, as a villain, I'll say something as usual." Noah looked at Haruai Biao and smiled. "If you surrender now, I'll leave you with a complete corpse." "No." Haruai Biao refused at the same time. "Surrender to you?" Haruai Biao said righteously. "Then I'd rather die. We won't give up." Haruai Biao looked like a righteous comrade and stared at Noah. "In order to make fun of Black Rabbit, even if we have to sacrifice our lives, we'll do it." Hearing this, Noah finally couldn't help but complain. "Aren't your lives too worthless?" The moment he finished speaking, a whirlwind suddenly shook and turned into a violent storm, sweeping toward Noah. Haruai Biao took advantage of the time when Noah was complaining and suddenly released a whirlwind, making the strong whirlwind like an invisible wave, violently rushing toward him. "You want to attack? Who's the villain?" Noah shouted as if he couldn't stand it anymore, but his actions weren't slow at all. He turned around and kicked the whirlwind violently. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled explosion, the invisible whirlwind was directly crushed by Noah's kick, scattering into a gentle breeze that spread in all directions. However, at this moment, a small bead suddenly shot over from the front and was imprinted in the eyes of Noah, who had kicked the whirlwind into smithereens. Seeing that bead, Noah narrowed his eyes and retreated quickly without any hesitation. Almost at the same time, Haruai Buyao's cold voice sounded. Explode! Under the command of the awe-inspiring voice, the gift of simulated godhood was bestowed upon the small bead. When they decided to participate in the fire dragon's birth ceremony, Haruai Buyao bought some gifts in the name of community. Those gifts, for ordinary people, could at most make life slightly more convenient. For example, beads that could emit fire, branches that could produce water, and so on. These were the lowest gifts, and Haruai Buyao bought a lot of them. And these gifts were all prepared for Haruai Buyao. Even if it could only make life slightly more convenient, in the hands of Haruai Buyao who could use language to give simulated divinity, it would transform into a powerful gift. In order to obtain a big harvest in the fire dragon's birth ceremony, Haruai Buyao prepared these gifts for Haruai Buyao, hoping that Haruai Buyao could win the gift game and use the gifts to develop the community. Haruai Buyao naturally didn't reject these gifts in consideration of the community. Now, the bead that Haruai Buyao threw out was a gift that could cause a small explosion. As a result, after being given the simulated divinity, the ordinary beads suddenly flashed with a dazzling light, and the soul inside suddenly expanded. In the next moment, an astonishing explosion occurred and the entire cage made of chains, setting off tumbling waves of fire that dyed the sky red. Haruai Buyao, who was holding Haruai Buyao, controlled the whirlwind to blow away the incoming waves of fire while retreating continuously. The tip of his nose was dripping with cold sweat. Fei! Buyao! Aren't you going too far? What can I do? I didn't know that the power of the simulated divinity would reach such a level. Haruai Buyao was also a little flustered, but her strong self-esteem made her pretend to be calm. But, if the opponent is that man, this level of power won't be a problem. Haruai Buyao nodded and agreed with Haruai Buyao's words. With Noah's strength, this level of power wouldn't be a problem. So, we should hurry and escape from here. Before Haruai Hiroyuki could finish his sentence, the familiar voice sounded again. Escape. You have to be able to escape first. With such a voice, a figure rushed out like a gust of wind from the rolling waves of fire in front of him. He directly blew away the waves of fire and violently rushed to the front of Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding Koyuki Hiroyuki. Haruai Buyao was shocked, and just as he was about to move, Noah's figure had already flashed in front of him. Almost reflexively, Haruai Buyao kicked at Noah, who had flashed in front of him, bringing with it a whistling sound. In response, Noah just moved his body sideways and flashed behind Haruai Buyao, avoiding the girl's fierce kick. It should be mentioned here. Noah's following actions were completely subconscious and not intentional. Noah raised one hand and slapped Haruai Buyao's delicate butt. Paw! When the crisp sound was heard, the surroundings became quiet. Chapter 1303. Silence. There was a deathly silence. The entire space, which had been filled with the smell of gunpowder because of the shocking explosion, instantly quieted down, and was replaced by a strange atmosphere. Feeling the pain from his buttocks, Haruai Hiroyuki's entire body stiffened, and even his mouth was slightly open. Obviously, Noah's slap had stunned Haruai Hiroyuki. Noah, who had flashed behind Haruai Hiroyuki and slapped his buttocks heavily, was also frozen in place. His palms simply stayed on Haruai Hiroyuki's buttocks due to excessive shock, and he did not react for a long time. Haruai Hiroyuki, who had lived to this day for a full 14 years, had never let anyone touch his buttocks. Now, in a mischievous fight, he was hit hard by a companion of the opposite sex. It would be strange if he could react. As a result, Haruhi Hiroyuki was stunned for a long time before he slowly turned his head and looked at Noah, who was floating behind him. His pretty face was still as emotionless and quiet as before, but there was a faint blush on his pink cheeks. As for Haruhi Hiroyuki's eyes, he was completely in disbelief. She couldn't believe that she had been slapped on the butt by Noah in such a situation. Facing Haruhi Hiroyuki's eyes full of disbelief, Noah only felt his head go numb, and then he realized that his hand, which was still on Haruhi Hiroyuki's buttocks, was continuously giving him a wonderful touch. Haruhi Hiroyuki was actually wearing slightly thick shorts, and a long sleeveless shirt that covered his buttocks, so Noah could put his hand on it through several layers of cloth, but a girl's body was just so soft. Even though there were several layers of cloth, Noah could still feel a trace of wonderful touch. However, this wonderful touch finally caused Noah to react. He hurriedly withdrew his hand and stuttered, which was a rare sight. I didn't do it on purpose." Hearing this, Haruhi Yaichi looked straight at Noah. There was no change in his expression, but his cheeks were still a little red. After a while, Noah heard Haruhi's whisper. It was so soft that it could be blown away by a gust of wind. Noah's heart was suddenly filled with an indescribable emotion. That kind of emotion was called embarrassment. It must be mentioned here again that Noah really didn't do it on purpose. He just casually slapped it down. After all, with Haruhi Hiroyuki's strength, it was impossible for him to make Noah use his full strength. In addition, this kind of playful fight made Noah feel a little dispirited. That was why he casually slapped it down. Who would have thought that this shot would be so accurate? So, Noah really didn't do it on purpose. However, it was useless to explain anything now. This was because even the distant bird looked at Noah with disdain as if it was looking at an idiot. So you're such a frivolous person? Noah choked and was almost speechless. At this time, Haruhi Yaichi had already taken Juhibu Yaichi and manipulated the whirlwind to distance themselves from Noah. Then, he looked at Noah and narrowed his eyes. Are you satisfied now? Can you let us go now? Noah's mouth twitched. What kind of words was that? Why did it sound like Noah purposely chased after these two girls just to touch Haruhi Yaichi's butt? This was definitely a big misunderstanding. In the end, isn't this a boring prank made by you two? Noah could only swallow his anger and looked at Juhibu Yaichi and Haruhi Yaichi's eyes. Now obediently come back with me, or else. Haruhi Yaichi blinked as if he wanted to see Noah's thoughts. He looked straight at Noah. Or else, are you going to continue touching me? Are you still planning to do that? Juhibu Yaichi looked at Noah with more and more contempt. If that's the case, then you'll have to go through me first. After saying that, Juhibu Yaichi held a few different colored beads in her hand. Originally, Juhibu Yaichi didn't want to waste the gifts that she was going to use during the fire dragon's birth ceremony. However, if Noah wanted to continue doing bad things to Haruhi Yaichi, then Juhibu Yaichi wouldn't continue hiding them. In any case, these blessings were only of a very common level. With No Name's current financial ability, he could more or less afford to waste them. Still, Zhou Yuanfei now did not feel that these gifts could do anything to Noah after his might light simulated the bestowment of divinity. Being guarded by Juhibu Yaichi and Haruhi Yaichi, Noah opened and closed his mouth. In the end, he gave up and said that sentence. That's right. If you don't want to surrender here, I'll beat each of you 10 times when I catch you. Now, let alone Haruhi Yaichi, even Juhibu Yaichi couldn't stay calm. Even if it was a problem child, as long as it was a proper girl, she wouldn't want to be spanked by someone of the opposite sex. Under such circumstances, Juhibu Yaichi and Haruhi Yaichi, who didn't want to retreat, finally started to retreat. Hey, Juhibu Yaichi. Haruhi Yaichi said. Why don't we surrender? It was the first time in history that Haruhibu Yaichi, who was quiet on the outside and stubborn on the inside, was willing to surrender. However, Juhibu Yaichi also had the same idea. Unfortunately, ancient flying bird's excessive pride caused it to struggle a little. Don't give up so easily, Haruhibu-san. Juhibu Yaichi looked at Noah, who had an expression of desperation, and stammered. Perhaps we can find a chance to escape. Who knows? In other words, Juhibu Yaichi intends to continue the challenge, right? Haruhibu Yaichi reminded her out of kindness. If you're caught, you'll be spanked 10 times. Juhibu Yaichi's courage withered. Even Haruhibu Yayoi was afraid of the consequences, not to mention the ancient birds that had been summoned to Hakata from the conservative Showa era. If Juhibu Yaichi was the one who was spanked by Noah in such a shameful place, she might even think of making Noah take responsibility. Thinking of this, Juhibu Yaichi became timid. Even if it's Noah, he wouldn't be so cruel, right? Juhibu Yaichi's voice revealed her lack of confidence. Although he treated you like that just now, it should be an unconscious action. Noah wouldn't do such a thing. Perhaps. Haruhibu Yaichi said in a low voice. But, I feel that compared to this, Noah is more of a man of his words. Do you want to try, Juhibu? Juhibu Yaichi finally fell silent. After a while, the two girls cast resentful gazes at Noah at the same time. I admit defeat this time. Although I'm unwilling, I don't want to be spanked again. Saying this, Juhibu Yaichi and Haruhibu Yaichi finally chose to surrender. It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. That's it. Following such a voice, shadows suddenly flew over from all directions, surrounding Noah, Komodo Asuka, and Haruhibu Masaaki's group of people in the chain cage. Noah, Juhibu Yaichi, and Haruhibu Yaichi were all stunned, then raised their heads and looked at their surroundings. In an instant, the three of them saw it. Outside the cage made of chains, there were beasts flapping their wings and hovering in the air, surrounding the entire chain cage. Those beasts flapping their wings were xenomorphs that looked like pterosaurs, but their bodies were covered with scales like lizards. In the hands of these pterosaurs, there was a flag with a flaming dragon pattern. A pterosaur that had absolute control of the air. A community with a flaming dragon pattern as its flag. These were all characteristics that Noah had heard of not long ago. And it was from Ren. Salamandra. Chapter 1304. Stratum Dominator. This title seemed to refer to every stratum dominator in the box court, but in fact, it was the guardian of the box court's order. It was also a system set up to promote the growth of the lower-level community. In the east, south, west, and north, there were stratum dominators in each of the 4 regions. For example, the stratum dominator in the east was a star spirit and a god. In the past, it was the white Yiksha, who used to be a demon king in the double digits. Stratum dominators like the white Yiksha had a lot of responsibilities. The most important task was to be responsible for the division and transfer of land in the box court, or to hold a gift game to test whether the lower-level community was qualified to move to a higher stratum, and so on. And when the natural disaster that disturbed the order, which was the demon king of the box court, appeared, as the guardian of order, the stratum dominators had the obligation to be the first to fight. It could be said that the stratum dominators existed to maintain the peace and order of the box court. For this reason, the stratum dominators were given all kinds of rights. Among them, there was the authority of the organizer like the demon king. However, there was not only one stratum dominator in each region. For example, the stratum dominators in the north were held by the leaders of multiple communities. The leader of the community called Salamandra was one of the stratum dominators in the north. This community had formed an alliance with No Name in the past, but after No Name met with misfortune, it unilaterally abandoned the alliance. Its base was located in the 54545 outer gate of the north. In the past, Salamandra was once a 4-digit community. However, since No Name met with misfortune 3 years ago, the body of the former leader of Salamandra began to have problems. Under the influence of the internal dispute over the successor, it was finally demoted to 5 digits. It must be known that although there was only a difference of 1 stratum between a 4-digit and a 5-digit number, the difference between this stratum was like heaven and earth. The box court that was divided into 7 stratums was divided into upper, middle, and lower stratum according to the difference in stratum and level. Among them, 6-digit and 7-digit numbers were divided into the lower stratum, 5-digit numbers were divided into the middle stratum, and only 1-digit, 2-digit, 3-digit, and 4-digit numbers were divided into the upper stratum. Of course, the difference between stratums was also very big. However, the difference between the upper, middle, and lower levels could be described as the difference between heaven and earth. If it wasn't for the fact that the requirement to become a tier dominator was only 5 digits, Salamandra might have been given a bye. Even so, Salamandra was still one of the top communities in the Northern District. In terms of influence and strength, Salamandra was even above Perseus. This time, at the lowest level of the Northern District, the barrier between the Eastern and Northern Districts, one of the organizers of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony was Salamandra. During this time, in order to maintain the security of the festival, Salamandra's military police had been stationed outside the 4 Million Gate, waiting for action at any time. After 16 nights retrograde, Kyuka Asaka and Haruhito Masaaki occupied the art pieces of the festival to enjoy the scenery. The military police of Salamandra were alerted. After that, Kyuka Asaka used the aura of might to imitate the godhood in her hands, causing a huge explosion. In this way, it was impossible not to attract the attention of Salamandra's military police. Thus, under the escort of Salamandra's military police, Noah, Kyuka Asaka, and Haruhito Masaaki were sent to the headquarters of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. If Noah's group wanted to resist, then even if it was Salamandra's military police, with Noah holding the line, they wouldn't be able to do anything to Kyuka Asaka and Haruhito Masaaki. However, their goal this time wasn't to start a war, but to participate in the various gift games held in the Northern District, and win all kinds of gifts as prizes. In order to not lose the qualifications to participate in the games, Noah, Kyuka Asaka, and Haruhito Masaaki were taken away without any resistance and brought to the headquarters of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. However, here, Noah's group met some unexpected people. I was wondering who had the guts to cause trouble at the ceremony held jointly by the Northern and Eastern Districts. While saying this, Byakuya Yiksha, who was wearing a kimono and holding a paper fan with 2 Valkyries looking at each other, looked at Noah, Kyuka Asaka, and Haruhito Masaaki with an unpleasant expression. "So it's you, Byakuya Yiksha." Kyuka Asaka was startled at first, then she was surprised. "Why are you here? Is it strange that I'm here?" Byakuya Yiksha became even more annoyed. As I said, this ceremony is held jointly by the Northern and Eastern Districts. As the ruler of the Eastern District, it would be strange if I didn't come, right? Speaking of this, Byakuya Yiksha seemed to have remembered something and looked at Noah with dissatisfaction. "Undoubtedly, I was the one who sent you the invitation, but you didn't even come to visit me and came to the Northern District. Isn't that a bit rude?" "It can't be helped." Noah crossed his arms and glanced at Byakuya Yiksha. "We're here to enjoy the ceremony, not to get involved in unnecessary trouble." "What do you mean?" Byakuya Yiksha frowned, his face tensed up, and said very seriously. "Do I look like I'm going to cause trouble for you?" Noah didn't answer immediately, but stared at Byakuya Yiksha and said without blinking. "Don't tell me you don't have any trouble to throw at us." As early as the beginning, Noah and 16 Knights discovered that this Fire Dragon birth ceremony was definitely not as simple as a simple ceremony. There must be some deeper problems hidden in it. In order not to get involved in this mess, Noah didn't want to greet Byakuya Yiksha and brought the members of the community to the Northern District without saying a word. If there was nothing, with Byakuya Yiksha's personality, he definitely wouldn't care about such a small problem. But now, since Byakuya Yiksha specially brought up this matter, it proved that Noah's concerns were not wrong. Under such circumstances, Byakuya Yiksha also understood that his thoughts had been seen through. His tense face slowly relaxed, and he spread his hands helplessly. Well, if you can't even guess something of this level, then you can't use the slogan "Down with the Demon King" as the purpose of the community. As soon as he said this, a somewhat heavy and extremely stern voice sounded. It's just arrogant words used by nameless people in the lower class to decorate themselves. Are the rulers of the Eastern District so naive to believe such words? The sudden cynicism and ridicule changed the atmosphere of the entire space. Noah narrowed his eyes slightly, raised his head, and looked forward. He saw a group of people walking in an orderly manner in the corridor in front of the hall. It was a group of soldiers who looked like lizards and a group of guards with slightly darker skin. Two people led the group. One of them was a stern-looking man with antlers on his head. The cynicism just now came from this person. The other was a girl about 11 or 12 years old. She was a young girl with bright red hair tied to her head. She wore a crown made of dragon horns and a brightly colored dress that made her look like a dancer. This group of people came in front of Noah and the others together and stopped not far in front of Noah and the others. Let me introduce you. The first to break the silence was Byakuya Yiksha. He pointed at the man with the paper fan in his hand and said, "Mandela Telderek, the trusted aide of the leader of the 5-digit community, Salamandra, in the Northern District. He is also the elder brother of the current leader." With that, Byakuya Yiksha pointed at the young girl about 11 or 12 years old. "This is the current leader of Salamandra, Sandora Telderek." Chapter 1305. Under Byakuya's introduction, Noah, Kubo Asaka, and Haruhi Masaaki's gazes all fell on Shadora, brazenly sizing her up. After all, including Noah, no one thought that the leader of Salamandra, one of the rulers of the North District, would be such a young child. However, Byakuya, the ruler of the East District, looked even younger than Shadora. But in reality, this former demon king had lived longer than anyone else. Therefore, it was very likely that this girl named Shadora was not as young as she appeared to be. That was not necessarily the case. Only Noah could be sure that Shadora was different from Byakuya. She should be the type that looked exactly the same as her actual age. As for why, Noah could detect a trace of nervousness from the girl named Shadora's eyes. Even so, Shadora still forced herself to remain calm and greeted Noah's group with a gentle and generous smile. "Hello everyone from No Name, I am Shadora from Salamandra. I am very happy to be able to see my former allies." "Former allies?" Jiu Yuao was slightly startled. "Former allies?" Haruhi Masaaki was also somewhat confused. "What? You don't know?" Byakuya said in surprise. "Before your community was attacked by the Demon King, you had formed an alliance with Salamandra. Didn't Kurorabi tell you?" Jiu Yuao and Haruhi Masaaki's eyes widened in surprise. The two girls really didn't know about this. However, this wasn't something that was worth Jiu Yuao and Haruhi Masaaki's concern. "Former allies?" Haruhi Masaaki tilted his head thoughtfully. "In other words, that alliance has been cancelled." As soon as this sentence was said, the atmosphere suddenly became a bit dangerous. Because, other than Jiu Yuao and Haruhi Masaaki, everyone else knew the secret. So, Noah spilled the beans without holding anything back. No Name and Salamandra's alliance was unilaterally abolished by Salamandra after No Name was attacked by the Demon King. Jiu Yuao and Haruhi Masaaki's expression suddenly changed. Unilaterally. Jiu Yuao glanced at Shadora and Mandela, then looked away as if she wasn't interested. "That's really a pity. Although that was what she said, whether it was Noah, Jiu Yuao, or Haruhi Masaaki, none of them showed any pity. This made the expression of Salamandra's members become a bit indescribable. Especially Shadora, although she didn't show anything on the surface, deep in her eyes faintly showed that she didn't know what to do with her feelings. Only Mandela, as if it was a matter of course. Right, continuing to maintain the alliance with no name will only lower the prestige and reputation of Salamandra. Abandoning the alliance is the right choice. With just one sentence, the originally sinister atmosphere suddenly became even worse. Brother Mandela, Shadora quickly said to Mandela. No matter what, we did unilaterally break the alliance. If we still take it as a matter of course, it's against etiquette. Compared to etiquette, reputation is more important. Mandela didn't allow for any explanation and looked at Noah's group with a sharp gaze. As the leader of Salamandra, one of the rulers of the Northern District, you shouldn't have come into contact with nameless people, let alone invite them to participate in your birth ceremony. Hearing Mandela's words, Jiu Yuao and Haruhi Masaaki's eyes showed traces of anger. Although Jiu Yuao and Haruhi Masaaki weren't people who would care about other people's provocation, if they were provoked again and again, they wouldn't be problem children if they didn't get angry. Only Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Shadora. Birth ceremony. So that's what it is. Originally, Noah had some doubts about Shadora being the leader of Salamandra. After all, with Shadora's age, even if she became the leader of Salamandra, it wouldn't have been long. From the looks of it, Shadora had only become the leader of Salamandra recently. The so-called birth of the fire dragon should be referring to Shadora becoming the leader of Salamandra and becoming one of the rulers of the Northern District. It seemed that the fire dragon birth ceremony was a ceremony for Shadora to become the leader of Salamandra and become one of the rulers of the Northern District. It was a ceremony to let Shadora become the eyes of the people. But, if this was the case, then another question arose. Since it was the birth ceremony of one of the rulers of the Northern District, why would it be held together with the Eastern District? Weren't there other rulers of the Northern District? Logically speaking, it should be held together with them. That would make sense, right? In an instant, many thoughts flashed through Noah's mind. However, it only lasted for an instant. Mandela, who didn't know the many thoughts that flashed through Noah's mind in a short moment, could only see Noah sizing up Shadora with a scrutinizing gaze with an angry expression. You're just a nobody, you're not allowed to look at Shadora like that. With a furious roar, Mandela suddenly pulled out the long sword at his waist and slashed at Noah's head with a tearing sound. Joyuan Osaka and Kasuga Hikari were shocked. This was because there was no mercy in this sword strike at all. If this attack hit, even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. However, Noah looked at the sword that was slashing toward him calmly. His expression did not change at all. Ding! The next moment, a crisp sound rang out. It was the sound of two fingers suddenly pinching the long sword that was slashing towards him, causing it to stop in midair. Mandela's gaze suddenly froze. Noah, who pinched the long sword with two fingers, glanced at the sharp blade that was only 2 centimeters away from his head, then looked up and looked at Mandela. I heard that there aren't many members with outstanding talents in Salamandra, but they rely on the widespread maintenance of the Viper bloodline to increase the strength of the organization. Among them, not only are there pterosaur vipers who dominate the air, but there are also many fire lizards and humanoid fire dragons. Therefore, they have a huge combat power. After saying that, Noah gradually tightened his grip on the long sword with his 2 fingers. In other words, you rely on the human wave tactic, not individual elites. If you want to find trouble, gather all your people first. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah's fingers suddenly tightened. Clang! With a crisp sound, the long sword in Mandela's hand was directly broken by Noah's 2 fingers. Mandela, who suddenly lost his target, staggered back 2 steps. Lord Mandela! The members of Salamandra were shocked, then they all showed fierce expressions, pulled out the weapons at their waists, and rushed in the direction of Noah's group. Only then did Shadora realize what was going on. She looked anxious. But there was one person who spoke faster than Shadora. Facing the charging members of Salamandra, Zhou Yuan Fei now let out a shout. Stop! The words that carried power turned into ripples and drilled into the bodies of the members of Salamandra, making these people who were much weaker than Zhou Fei now involuntarily stop. At this time, Haruai Biao suddenly stepped forward. Get out of the way! A violent whirlwind shook Haruai Biao's body. Bang! One by one, the members of Salamandra were sent flying. Chapter 1306. Bang! The violent wind was like a shockwave, with Haruhibu as the center. It exploded in all directions and sent the members of Salamandra who were charging towards Noah flying. Suddenly, the lizard men like fire lizards and dark-skinned people were like large pieces of trash. They were either heavily smashed into the wall or the ground, some even directly hit the furniture in the hall, the luxurious furniture scattered. In less than 10 seconds, more than 20 members of Salamandra were all on the ground, making a series of painful groans. What? Mandela looked around at the members of Salamandra, and then looked at Zhou Yuki and Haruhibu. The look in his eyes completely changed. A mere community of no name actually managed to defeat the elite troops of Salamandra in an instant with just 2 people. Elite forces, huh? Zhou Yuki looked condescendingly at the members of Salamandra who were lying on the ground and struggling to get up, then showed a very elegant smile. If these are the elites of Salamandra, then no wonder this 5-digit community needs to rely on numbers to make up for it. I feel the same. Haruhibu stepped back and nodded expressionlessly. My rabbit is much more powerful than the dragons and lizards here. That's what he said, but in fact, in terms of strength, Black Rabbit was above Zhou Yuki and Haruhibu. If even Zhou Yuki and Haruhibu couldn't deal with it, then Salamandra naturally couldn't deal with Black Rabbit, who was a noble of Hakata. So, to be precise, Haruhibu's words weren't wrong. It's just that, in other people's ears, it was quite harsh. You. Mandela showed a violent expression. You guys, seeing this, Shadora finally couldn't stand it anymore. Onie-san. Shadora was a little angry. If you continue to be rude to my guest, I'll really get angry. What are you talking about? Shadora. Mandela pointed at Noah's group. These people attacked at your birth ceremony and even disrupted the order of the ceremony, so they were brought here. How can you treat these guys as guests? That's enough, Mandela. Byakuya also couldn't help but say. They were invited by me. Isn't it rude for you to hit my guests? In other words, the ruler of the East District is prepared to protect these people. Mandela didn't back down and said this to Byakuya mockingly. Are you becoming more and more disgraceful? You're the strongest ruler of the East District. As his voice fell, a terrifying pressure suddenly spread throughout the entire hall. Under that terrifying pressure, including the members of Salamandra who were struggling to get up from the ground, Shadora, Mandela, Kudo Osaka, and Haruhi Masaaki all felt their shoulders become heavy, and their bodies became heavy. The only one who could remain calm was Noah. Even so, Noah still looked at Byakuya with a dignified expression. There, Byakuya spread out the paper fan with the flag of the 2 goddesses, covering half of his face, but his eyes were piercing and cold as ice. You keep saying that it's just no name, but you let the elites of Salamandra take action against a no name. After being defeated, you keep on pestering him. Who's the one who's losing more and more of their dignity? Mandela. Mandela's expression changed. However, Byakuya's next words made Mandela's heart sink. Moreover, do you think I'm protecting my guests? Byakuya looked at Mandela coldly. Based on your words, you are no match for them. If this continues, the one who will suffer in the end will only be Salamandra. I only spoke up because I didn't want to embarrass Shadora. Or, Mandela, do you want to smear Shadora's reputation? TSK. Mandela was speechless. Mandela was not a fool. Mandela understood that Noah, Jo Yuasuke, and Haruhito Masaaki's group were not easy to deal with. If they continued to pester them, unless they really mobilized all of Salamandra's troops, it would be impossible to do anything to Noah's group. But if that happened, it would inevitably cause chaos in the entire fire dragon's birth ceremony. At that time, as the protagonist of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, Shadora would really lose face. And in order to deal with No Name, who didn't even have a flag or a name, mobilizing a large force like this would definitely affect Salamandra's prestige and reputation. It was just like what Byakuya said. If this continued, Salamandra would only be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Mandela calmed down. Perhaps to give Mandela a way out, Shadora gave an extremely serious order. This matter ends here, don't cause any more trouble. Yes. Mandela closed his eyes. After a while, he calmly responded. The sinister atmosphere that permeated the air finally eased a little. However, at this time, outside, a person rushed in a panic. Not good. Don't make a ruckus. Mandela looked at the panicking person. What happened? Yes. The person hurriedly said. Someone destroyed the buildings on the street, causing panic on the street. What? Mandela's gaze sharpened. Who did it? There are only two of them, the person said. One of them seems to be you two of the Hakata nobility. When this sentence spread throughout the hall, Noah, Jo Yuasuke, Haruhito Masaaki, and Byakuya's group all froze and lost their ability to react. About an hour later, No Name walked out of the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. As the leader, Rin looked like he was about to cry and said, "It's only the first day, and everyone has already caused such a big commotion. How are we going to live the rest of the days?" I'm sorry, young Master Ren. Hei-Tu's rabbit ears drooped down, and then looked to the side. When he saw Reverse 16 Knights, Jo Yuasuke, and Haruhito Masaaki's group all looking so heartless, he also looked like he was about to cry. How are we going to live the rest of the days? After Noah, Jo Yuasuke, and Haruhito Masaaki caused a huge explosion in the air and caused a commotion, Reverse 16 Knights and Hei-Tu, who were chasing each other, also destroyed a building, causing panic on the street. Under such circumstances, Mandela, who had finally chosen to back down, exploded in anger, and repeatedly said that he wanted to chase No Name out of the North District. And the three problem children were obviously not people who would back down. In the end, both sides left on bad terms. After knowing the whole story, it was not surprising that Renhei, who came later, would have such a reaction. Looking at the dejected Hei-Tu and Ren, and then looking at the heartless Reverse 16 Knights, Jo Yuasuke, and Haruhito Masaaki, Noah smiled bitterly and looked at the operation headquarters behind him. Reverse 16 Knights turned his head and looked at Noah. What's wrong? Nothing. Noah shook his head. I just feel that if this farce ends here, and everything goes smoothly, then it'll be good. Is that so? Reverse 16 Knights suddenly smiled. I'm looking forward to interesting developments. As if to confirm Reverse 16 Knights' words, the sky gradually turned dark, revealing a feeling of a storm. Night fell at this moment. Chapter 1307. After that, Jo Yuki and Hiroi Biao claimed that because of Noah, they didn't get to enjoy the festival at all. They stubbornly said that they wanted to continue strolling around the streets. Then, they pulled the black rabbit and disappeared without a trace. Although the black rabbit was following them, Noah was very doubtful about whether the black rabbit could stop the two problem children when they were in trouble. He took out the gift card and materialized Letitia. He then caught up with Kyuki Asuke and Kasuga Hibiya. As a result, when the sky turned dark, only Noah, 16 knights, and Ren, the 3 male compatriots, were left. Looking at the beautiful night sky with some stars, Noah turned his gaze to Ren. "So, where are we going now?" 16 Knights Reversal also turned his gaze to Ren. "Don't tell me you're going to do something as boring as looking for a hotel. Then I might as well go with those young ladies and wander around, okay?" That. Ren, you stammered. "Actually, before we left Salamandra, Lord White Yiksha told me to go to the Thousand Eyes branch first." "Oh." Noah raised his eyebrows. "Is there a branch of Thousand Eyes here?" "Yes." Ren nodded. "Although in the North District, Thousand Eyes isn't in every outer door like the East District, there is still a branch of Thousand Eyes at the border between the East and North District." "Did White Yiksha tell us to go there?" Reverse 16 Knights rubbed his chin. After a while, he revealed an eager smile. "It seems that something interesting must have happened." "It's interesting to you, but not to us." Noah sighed and then asked Ren. "Since White Yiksha told us to go there, it must be related to the inside story of why the East District and North District cooperated to hold the festival. If we follow White Yiksha's instructions, we have to get involved in this mess. Ren, you have to think carefully before making a decision." Ren pondered for a while. After a while, he looked up with a serious expression. "No matter what, I think it's better to talk to Lord White Yiksha. Maybe it's something beneficial to us." "Beneficial?" Noah rubbed his temples. "But I think it's more likely to disappoint you." Noah's words made 16 Knights Reversal and Ren focus on Noah. "Something that disappoints me." Ren hesitated and then said with uncertainty. "Mr. Noah, do you already know what Lord White Yiksha is going to say?" "What?" 16 Knights Reversal's mouth slightly raised. "Could it be that you've made some discoveries as well? Since you said, also, it means that you have also made some discoveries, right?" Noah glanced at 16 Knights, who was in reverse. "Let me guess, did you think of the same thing as me? For example?" 16 Knights Reversal did not want to be outdone and showed a provocative smile. "The inside story of why the East and North Districts are cooperating to hold the ceremony. So you've noticed it too?" Noah scratched his cheek. "But, you're right. After seeing the leader of Salamandra and connecting it to the fire dragon's birth ceremony, it's not hard to guess the inside story." Seeing that Noah and 16 Knights Reversal were having a conversation that he could not understand, Ren quickly spoke. "Mr. Noah, Mr. 16 Knights Reversal, did you really find something? Didn't you find it?" "Young Master Shao Budian." 16 Knights Reversal said. "Undoubtedly, it's a ceremony for the new ruler of the North Districts to announce his appointment. The other rulers of the North Districts are nowhere to be seen. Instead, the ruler of the East Districts, White Yiksha, came to help the other party hold the birth ceremony. This is enough to explain everything, right?" Hearing that, Ren frowned. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something and looked up. Could it be that because the other rulers of the North Districts are not cooperating, Shadora has no choice but to seek help from the ruler of the East Districts? To be more precise, not only are the other rulers of the North Districts not cooperating with the birth ceremony of the child named Shadora, but they also seem to be dissatisfied with the fact that Shadora has become the ruler of the North Districts. That's why White Yiksha intervened, right? Noah narrowed his eyes slightly. After all, the new ruler of the North Districts is only an 11-year-old child. It's only natural that others would look down on and be dissatisfied, right? It's fine if it's just disdain and dissatisfaction. 16 Knights Reversal shrugged. The worst thing is that the leader of Salamandra, is an 11-year-old child. This matter in itself has caused many of the rulers of the other classes in the Northern District to feel enmity towards them. They are preparing to do something during this fire dragon's birth ceremony. Who knows? What? Ren was shocked. In other words, the rulers of the North Districts might attack this place during the fire dragon's birth ceremony. It's unlikely to be an attack. After all, they are rulers of the Order Guardians. It's impossible for them to attack openly. The biggest possibility is that it will involve the political issues between the rulers of the North Districts, right? Noah shook his head. If White Yiksha wants us to get involved in the political issues of the North Districts, then I still think it's best that we don't get involved in this mess. I think so too. 16 Knights Reversal raised his hand with a bored expression. It's fine if it's something else, but political disputes are really boring. If it's something like that, I don't want to get involved. Ren fell silent at once, his face full of uncertainty. Noah and 16 Knights Reversal didn't speak again. Instead, they quietly waited for the leader of the community to make a decision. Although compared to Ren, be it Noah or 16 Knights Reversal, they were more like the center of the community. Ren was still the leader. Therefore, Noah and 16 Knights Reversal didn't plan on overstepping their authority and left the decision to Ren. I still think we should listen to what Lord White Yiksha has to say. After an unknown period of time, Ren finally made a decision. Firstly, Lord White Yiksha has taken care of us in the past. It won't be good if we cut off all ties with him. Secondly, even if it involves the political power of the North Districts, if the other party can pay us a reasonable reward, we still have to intervene when it's time. After all, our community doesn't have many choices to choose from. Ren looked at Noah and the 16 Knights of Reversal. Grasping every opportunity to become stronger is what we should be doing right now. That's what I think. Ren's words made Noah and 16 Knights Reversal look at each other and laugh at the same time. Upon seeing this, Ren understood. Noah and 16 Knights Reversal agreed with his decision. North District's 40000000 Outer Gate, Thousand Eyes Branch. Noah, 16 Knights Reversal, and Ren were invited into the shop by the shop assistant. As if they were well served, they ate a big meal and soaked in the hot spring. Finally, they each wore a bathrobe and came to the reception room. When Noah and the others came to the reception room, there were two other people in the reception room besides White Yiksha. Seeing these two people, whether it was Noah or 16 Knights, both of them were slightly stunned, and they stood up in surprise. Ren exclaimed in astonishment. Shadora. Yes. Apart from White Yiksha, there were also Shadora and Mandela. Everyone, we meet again. It was completely different from during the day. At this moment, Shadora's face had an innocent expression that was completely consistent with her age. I hope you don't take what happened during the day to heart. White Yiksha also said this with a serious expression. Actually, there's something we hope to discuss with you. Chapter 1308. Actually, there's something we want to discuss with you. With that said, White Yiksha placed a letter on the table, exposing the contents of the letter to Noah, 16 Knights Reversal, and Ren. The three of them subconsciously looked at the letter on the table. There was only one sentence written on the letter. A demon king will attack the fire dragon's birth ceremony. When this sentence was imprinted in Noah and 16 Knights' eyes, their pupils constricted at the same time. Demon King. A demon king will attack the fire dragon's birth ceremony. This. Ren's eyes widened, and he started to panic. No. It can't be, right? A demon king will attack the fire dragon's birth ceremony. Calm down, young Master Tiny. 16 Knights Reversal pressed down on Ren's shoulder, but his gaze turned sharp as he swept his gaze towards White Yiksha. This shouldn't be a joke, right? If anyone uses this kind of joke on me, I'll definitely let them know that they can't make any kind of joke. White Yiksha met 16 Knights' gaze. I think you guys are the same, right? What's going on? Noah asked directly. Is this letter a premonition of a crime? No, this letter is a prophecy made by Thousand Eyes, an officer who has the gift of seeing the future. White Yiksha closed his eyes gently as he fanned himself with the paper fan in his hand. The reliability of the prophecy is almost 100%. At least, it hasn't been wrong so far. So, I have to tell you that this is definitely not a joke. I see, Noah said calmly. So, as the ruler of the strongest class, you came to the North District to hold the festival together with Salamandra? No, I'll help with the birth ceremony this time. The main reason is that the other rulers in the Northern District aren't cooperating with Shadora's birth ceremony at all. As a result, as the ruler of the Eastern District, it's my turn to be the co-host, White Yiksha said in a bitter tone. So, if you're wondering if there's a secret behind why the North and East District will hold the ceremony together, you'll probably be disappointed. It's only because the other rulers in the North District won't cooperate that it's my turn. Noah was instantly speechless. Not to mention Noah, even 16 Knights looked as if she had eaten a fly. Her face was full of bitterness. In the end, he guessed a lot of reasons, but he didn't expect the reason to be so simple. Was this the so-called being too smart for your own good? However, this way, the reason why White Yiksha sent an invitation letter to No Name was clear. This was because the mission of No Name, which had lost its flag and name, was to defeat the Demon King. It was because of this reason that when Noah exposed the purpose of White Yiksha's invitation in the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony, White Yiksha said, if I can't guess something of this level, then I won't be able to use defeat the Demon King as the mission of the community. In other words, the reason you send us the invitation letter is to let us take the Demon King's head. 16 Knights had a ferocious warrior expression on his face. How despicable. Did things become so interesting? Reverse 16 Knights didn't have the slightest bit of interest in political disputes. However, if he played a game of bestowment with the Demon King, it would ignite 16 Knights' fighting spirit more than anything else. The problematic child, who longed to be moved and entertained, let out an aura as if he was looking for an opponent, telling everyone present. At this moment, 16 Knights was in a very good mood. However, 16 Knights' good mood caused the person who was in the worst mood to explode. If you want to play, then go back to your territory to play. Mandela shouted angrily. Unlike you nameless people who raise the slogan, down with the Demon King, as if it's a game, once we lose in front of the Demon King, don't you know what kind of price we will have to pay? You will be destroyed by the Demon King. Ren's expression stiffened slightly, and then became gloomy. Yes. The Demon King's attack wasn't a game. Once they lost in the game with the Demon King, then the tragic situation in No Name's base might happen to Salamandra. Mandela clearly understood this point. When 16 Knights was so excited because of the appearance of the Demon King, it was natural that Mandela would be furious. However, in response to this, 16 Knights looked straight at Mandela with an unruly expression. What? Was the famous Salamander afraid? When the time comes, just obediently hide behind us and be protected by us. You. What did you say? Mandela was furious, and one of his hands reached for the hilt of the long sword at his waist. Brother Mandela. Shadora was shocked and hurriedly tried to stop him. At this moment, a cold sense of oppression enveloped Mandela. Mandela's hand froze, and his whole body stiffened as if he was touched by something cold. He raised his head abruptly and looked in the direction of the cold sense of oppression. There, Noah looked at Mandela with an unusually calm gaze and said slowly, "Don't worry, Mandela. This time, I won't be merciful. If you're prepared to risk your life, then draw your sword." Mandela only felt suffocated, and his expression turned ugly. One of his hands couldn't move at all, and he couldn't reach for the hilt of the sword that was not far away. You should give me the same, Mandela. White Yiksha's brows furrowed. You're the ones who need help. Is this the tone you use to ask for help? We're dealing with the Demon King. Mandela's expression kept changing as he stared at Noah and the others. Can a group of a no-name really help us defeat the Demon King? Oh. 16 Knights Reversal grinned with interest. In other words, are you going to test our abilities? I won't stop you, Mandela. White Yiksha glanced at Mandela. But I have to tell you, those two over there, one has a gift that even the so-called omniscient Laplace couldn't identify, and the other has more than 1,000 types of divine armament. If you think there's a way to test their abilities, then I'm looking forward to it. A gift that even Laplace couldn't identify. Mandela's eyes widened. More than 1,000 types of divine armament. Shadora was even more shocked. Impossible. Mandela shouted. Let's not talk about the former for now. How is it possible to have 1,000 types of divine armament? It should be known that divine armament bestowed with divine armament was a mythical item with terrifying power. It was like a godly gun that left the opponent with nowhere to run, a gun that would never miss a single shot Gungnir. It was like the divine spear of victory that, once thrown, would definitely lead the result to victory, the Brahmastra spear. It was like a cursed divine spear that could reverse cause and effect and definitely hit the heart, the spear of piercing death, Gibalg. These terrifying divine armament bestowed with divine armament were terrifying existences that even the 3 strongest types of boxers couldn't ignore. And these divine armament bestowed with divine armament were almost all in the hands of the highest level Asura gods and Buddhas. The rest of the people only had imitations of divine armament. Those who had the real thing, which one of them wasn't a famous person in boxers? Noah had more than 1,000 types of divine armament bestowed like this. There should be a limit to joking, right? However, this was also the reason why White Yiksha, who was once a 2-digit demon king, was so shocked. If he only had 1 or 2, it wouldn't be so shocking. However, if there were more than 1,000 types, that would be too ridiculous. Anyway, I won't believe it. Mandela stared at Noah. Unless you can show it to me. Chapter 1309. Unless you can take it out and show it to me. The moment he said that, the entire space fell into a strange silence. Everyone present turned their gaze to Noah. They did not even dare to blink, worried that they would miss something. This included White Yiksha and 16 Knights, who had personally witnessed Noah using the Gate of Babylon to project thousands of treasures in the most extravagant way to vent his anger. That was the same for White Yiksha and 16 Knights. Among them, Rin even looked at Noah with some anticipation and nervousness. After all, the last time Noah fought Arjul, Rin was unable to rush to the scene before Noah finished off Luos and Arjul because of his leg strength. After that, when he heard that Noah had at least 1,000 types of Godhead bestowment armaments, Ren was like Mandela now. He could not believe it no matter what. Later on, during the month-long community activities, whenever the community encountered some difficulties, Noah was always able to take out items with magical effects to help the community overcome the difficulties. This made Ren gradually become skeptical. Now, it was the time to witness Noah's heritage. Under such circumstances, Noah frowned slightly. He looked up slightly and looked at Mandela without saying a word. What's wrong? Mandela was still staring at Noah. There was no mockery or contempt in his expression. There was only probing. You can't take it out. Can't take it out. It could only be said that this was a joke. Even the hero King Gilgamesh had thousands of prototypes of treasures, let alone Noah, who had more treasures than the hero King Gilgamesh. After all, the treasures in the hero King Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon were only prototypes at best. Noah's Gate of Babylon had treasures that could exist in the form of weapons and items. In ancient times, the establishment of various mythological systems was based on reference, so the contents of many mythological systems were basically the same. Under such circumstances, each prototype of treasures would give birth to 2 or 3 types of treasures, which were owned by famous figures in various mythological systems. In this way, all the noble phantoms that could exist in the form of weapons and tools would be stored in Noah's Gate of Babylon. The number of noble phantoms alone had reached tens of thousands. Now, everyone was asking Noah to take out thousands of treasures. It couldn't be any simpler. However, before that, there was one thing that Noah needed to confirm. What about the reward? Noah met Mandela's gaze. If we help you defeat the Demon King, what kind of reward will we get? Hearing this, Mandela was stunned at first and almost subconsciously wanted to scold Noah. That was the Demon King. If it could be defeated so easily, then Mandela would not have needed to lower himself to ask for help at all. Wasn't it too early to talk about the reward now? Mandela, who had these thoughts flash through his mind, immediately dispelled this idea and came up with another one. If the man in front of him really had thousands of divine personas bestowed weapons, then he might really be able to defeat the Demon King. With thousands of divine personas bestowed gifts, Noah would have to be at least a 4-digit level just by relying on those gifts alone. What's more, in the operation headquarters of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, Noah did not use any of the gifts. He only used 2 fingers to block Mandela's sword and forced Mandela to retreat. It was impossible that he only relied on those powerful divine personas. In this case, with Noah's own strength and the many divine personas bestowed gifts, he would definitely be able to reach the 4-digit level. As long as it was not a 3-digit level existence like the Asura gods and Buddhas in various myths and legends, then defeating the Demon King with 4-digit strength was not a fantasy. So, Mandela was silent for a while. After a while, he looked at Noah. What kind of reward do you want? In other words, he allowed Noah to do as he pleased. Noah's eyes flashed, then he suddenly smiled and turned his gaze to Shadora, the leader of Salamandra. In that case, my condition is that if we help you defeat the Demon King, the ownership of the Demon King will belong to us. No name, huh? Shadora was stunned. The others were also slightly stunned, then they fell silent one after another. Only 16 knights and Ren's eyes lit up slightly. There was no doubt that the Demon King was a natural disaster for the box. However, this also proved that the power of every Demon King was extremely terrifying. Therefore, if they could get a Demon King to join them, it would be a good thing that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. However, in the box, there was such a rule. Once they were able to clear the game held by the Demon King, then the Demon King would forever belong to the community that cracked the game. And if there were more than 2 communities that cracked the game, then the ownership of the Demon King would be negotiated between the participating communities. According to this rule, only one of the 2 communities, No Name and Salamandra, who were involved in the invading Demon King's gift game, would be able to obtain the ownership of the Demon King. At this moment, Noah was asking Salamandra to give the ownership of the Demon King to No Name. This. Shadora hesitated. There was no other way. For Salamandra, which did not have many elite members, the Demon King joining them was also a very attractive thing. It was not an exaggeration to say that it would be like adding wings to a tiger. Giving away the ownership of a Demon King just like that, no matter who it was something that could not be magnanimous. Shadora was only 11 years old. It was too difficult for Shadora to make such an important decision. Chapter 13:10. After settling the matter of the Demon King's attack, Shadora began to discuss the fire dragon's birth ceremony with everyone. They mainly talked about the fire dragon's birth ceremony. After all, if the Demon King chose to attack during the fire dragon's birth ceremony, it meant that he wanted to attack during the fire dragon's birth ceremony. Therefore, including Noah, 16 knights, and Byakuya, everyone thought that the Demon King would not attack after the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. The Fire Dragon's birth ceremony would take a few more days. In other words, the Demon King would choose a time in these few days to attack the 4000000 outer sect. In view of this, Salamandra, as the organizer of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, would let the military police increase their vigilance in these few days to not let go of any suspicious places. No Name, on the other hand, would stay by Shadora's side during this period of time to ensure her safety. As one of the leaders of the North District, the possibility of Shadora being targeted by the Demon King was very high. Therefore, not only No Name's group, but even Byakuya would accompany Shadora in public to protect the safety of this young leader of the North District and prevent her from being harmed by the Demon King. Shadora seemed to have some opinions about the fact that everyone put her safety first, but she did not voice it out. Perhaps, Shadora thought that compared to her safety, the 4000000 outer sect needed more protection. Unfortunately, unlike Salamandra, No Name did not have many members. In fact, there were very few members. There were only 4 people: Noah, 16 Knights, Joyu, and Haruhide Masaaki. Even if Hei-2 was included, there were only 5 people. As for Ren, this young leader did not have much combat strength and could not be considered as part of the group. This way, even if Letitia and Astra were included, No Name could only take out 7 people. Using 7 people to protect the safety of the entire 4000000 outer sect. No matter what, it was not realistic. Moreover, the Demon King would attack during the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, so it was very likely that he would attack Shadora. Focusing on protecting Shadora was the most rational thing to do. It was because of this that Shadora didn't raise any objections. She could only acquiesce. The final decision was that during the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, as long as they were in public, the people from No Name would accompany Shadora. Tomorrow, there will only be one game of grace that Shadora will host. In the end, Mandela threw out this sentence. I hope that you will all be there. After saying that, Shadora and Mandela once again looked at Noah discreetly. Then, they left the reception hall and returned to the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. Looking at the direction in which Shadora and Mandela left, 16 Knights shrugged as he recalled the gazes they cast at Noah when they left. It seems that the limelight this time has been completely stolen by this little brother. Why? Do you want to be in the limelight? Noah glanced at 16 Knights. Then why didn't you just teach that Mandela guy a lesson? I guarantee that you will be in the limelight more than anything else. Unfortunately, that guy didn't look for trouble with me. 16 Knights curled his lips. If you don't scare him, maybe I will be able to make a move later. Seeing the dangerous smile on the face of 16 Knights, Ren, who clearly knew how troublesome this problem child was, felt his scalp go numb. He quickly opened his mouth. Please, please don't do that. We are now in a cooperative relationship with Salamandra. Don't do anything that will damage our relationship. If you really want to be in the limelight, just take out your grace card and show it to others. White Yiksha said gloatingly. Although it's not as unbelievable as Noah taking out thousands of divine sparks, even Laplace couldn't identify your truth unknown. I guarantee that many people will also find it unbelievable. Then forget it. 16 Knights spread his hands. I want to be in the limelight, not show off. For things like showing off, it's better to wait until I defeat an arrogant opponent and take out the grace card when the other party asks, what is your grace card? That's cool and interesting. Hearing this kind of development, everyone could only look at each other in dismay. Then, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, it had to be said that this kind of situation could really happen. It was indeed quite eye-catching. Well, I hope the two of you can be of great use in the war with the Demon King. White Yiksha waved the paper fan in his hand and smiled meaningfully. Although, Before that, the demon king will be dealt with by me, the strongest ruler of the hierarchy. Oh. 16 Knights raised his eyebrows and showed a typical provocative smile. In other words, White Yiksha, you want to compete with me for prey. You're probably the only ones who can treat the demon king as prey, White Yiksha said helplessly. Although I don't have any thoughts of snatching your prey, I'm still the ruler of the hierarchy. Facing the demon king is my responsibility. White Yiksha, who said this, didn't consider that he would be defeated. However, this was to be expected, right? As for why, the reason was very simple. Because White Yiksha was the materialization of the celestial law called the heavenly shaking theory. The so-called heavenly shaking theory referred to the geocentric theory. In the heavenly shaking theory, the Earth was the center of the universe and the other planets orbited the Earth. Including the Sun. White Yiksha was the materialization of this heavenly shaking theory. The celestial law that existed before the concept of heaven and earth was born ruled the center of all the views of the universe. However, with the development of human history, the heavenly shaking theory was gradually denied. As the materialization of the celestial law, White Yiksha's spirit kept shrinking. In the end, it was suppressed to the horizon of the White Night, becoming the king of the White Night that would never set or turn dark. Because of this, White Yiksha was one of the star spirits in charge of the sun's operation. He was also the highest existence that could be compared to the highest level of the sun god. At the same time, he had the divine might of the gods and also the royal might of the demon king. The White Night King, born from these two, was the strongest star spirit and was ranked 10th in the box court. Even though Ling's personality was constantly shrinking and had converted to Buddhism, becoming a Yiksha, a ghost god in charge of water and earth, Ling's personality was once again degraded. As a star spirit and a god, White Yiksha was not someone that any demon king could do anything to. If one wanted to defeat White Yiksha, one had to be at least a 3-digit level. And if White Yiksha returned the godhood he had obtained after converting to Buddhism and returned to the state of the purest and strongest star spirit, even the 3-digit Asura gods and Buddhas would not be able to do anything to this cheating existence. Considering this point, with White Yiksha around, no matter what kind of opponent came, even if it was a demon king, there was nothing to be afraid of. However, Noah looked at White Yiksha. I think it's better for you to be careful. This sentence stunned White Yiksha and he frowned. What? Do you think I'll lose to a mere demon king? No, in terms of combat strength, I'm afraid that an existence that can guarantee that he can defeat you has not appeared until now, right? Noah shook his head. However, almost everyone knows that the fire dragon's birth ceremony this time is jointly held by the East and North districts. They also know that you, White Yiksha, will definitely be here. Even so, the demon king will still attack. This proves that the other party must have prepared a method to deal with you. You'd better be careful. White Yiksha fell silent. After a while, White Yiksha nodded. You're right. It's better for me to be careful. At that moment, the door opened. A shop assistant walked in a flustered manner and bowed in salute. Everyone, your companion, Miss Zhou Yuan Fei Niao, is injured. This sentence made the expressions of Noah and company change. Chapter 13:11. When Noah, reverse 16 Knights, Ren, and Byakuya walked out of Thousand Eyes Lounge and arrived at the entrance of the shop, Kuyuki Soyuki happened to be supported by Hiroi Bun and Kororibi as they walked in. Seeing Jo Yuki's condition, the group stopped. At this time, Jo Yuki's clothes had marks that looked like they were bitten by sharp teeth. It was also stained with mud and the blood of unknown creatures. It looked very dirty. Not only that, but Noah and the others could also clearly see the teeth marks on ancient flying bird's skin, which was usually not exposed to the sun, through the gaps in his clothes that looked like they were bitten by sharp teeth. More than half of the blood on Zhou Yuan Flying Bird's body came from the blood that seeped out from the teeth marks. Looking at Joe-yuki's miserable appearance, Noah silently looked at Letitia, who was at the back. Letitia lowered her head slightly, and even her voice became a little low. "Sorry, Master." The reason why Noah let Letitia stay with Joe-yuki and Hiroyuki was because he was afraid that Kurorobi would not be able to stop these two problem children if they were to cause trouble. However, Letitia admitted that since Noah let her follow Joe-yuki, then whether it was because of Noah's orders or because of the same community of companions, she should protect Joe-yuki. Therefore, Joe-yuki's injuries, Letitia thought that it was because she did not protect her well enough. Letitia's apology was not only to ask for forgiveness from Noah, but also to ask for forgiveness from herself. It was not only Letitia. Even Kurorobi and Hiroyuki seemed to blame themselves, thinking that they did not protect Joe-yuki well enough. Under such circumstances, Joe-yuen Fei now hurriedly spoke. "I suddenly left the group and acted alone, that's why it's like this. It has nothing to do with anyone." However, as soon as she said that, a light and tender voice with some worry and timidity sounded. "Yuki." The sudden voice startled Noah and the others. They turned their eyes and looked at the source of the voice. Only then did they realize. On Joe-yuki's shoulder, there was a little person smaller than a palm. It was a little person that was emitting light, wearing a pointy hat, like a fairy in a fairy tale. Seeing this little person, 16 Knights was surprised. "Miss, what is that on your shoulder?" Joe-yuen Flying Bird shook his head in confusion and said, "That's right. This is what I encountered by chance when I was shopping. When it saw me, it ran. I left the group to chase this child. In the end, I was attacked by a large group of rats at an art exhibition." "Rat?" 16 Knights was stunned. "Rats?" Ren was also stunned. "Rats?" Yiksha could not help but be stunned. So that's how it is. Although Noah was also a little stunned, he was more enlightened. "Most of the blood on your body is rat's blood, right?" "Yes." Joe-yuki said helplessly. "Because the exhibition is in a cave, in order not to cause a collapse, I did not dare to use the gift of simulated godhood. Moreover, there are many ordinary people there. If I am not careful, they will also be affected. So, I was bitten by the rats." "But," Ren said in confusion, "why would the rats attack you?" "Someone is probably manipulating those rats behind the scenes," Haruai Hybe said very seriously. "When we arrived at the scene, Yuki was entangled by the rats. Before Black Rabbit and Letitia drove the rats away, I tried to talk to them, but none of them responded. They should have lost their consciousness and rationality. But why would the person manipulating the rats attack Miss Yuki?" Black Rabbit was puzzled. Miss Yuki just arrived in the North District. Even if she came to the box court, it was only a month ago. She has no time to make enemies. There is no reason to be attacked for no reason. Who said that the other party must attack Miss? 16 Knights looked at the pointed hat elf standing on Joe-yuki's shoulder. His eyes became sharp. "Maybe, the other party attacked that little guy over there." "Ah!" The elf with the pointy hat was frightened by the sharp gaze of 16 Knights. He screamed and hid behind the waist-length hair of Distant Bird. However, 16 Knights wasn't wrong. If Joe-yuki was not attacked, then it could only be the pointed hat elf who was with Joe-yuki was the target of the attack. Thus, everyone silently gathered their gazes on Joe-yuki's hair. Being stared at by so many people, perhaps it really scared the elf with the pointed hat, causing the little fellow to shiver and hide behind the neck of the Distant Bird. "Okay, everyone." Joe-yuki quickly protected the pointed hat elf and stared at Noah and the others. "Don't scare this child." Seeing Joe-yuki's protective behavior, everyone could only look at each other and then bitterly laugh. "No matter what, go wash off the dirt and blood on your body," White Yiksha said resolutely. Your clothes are also torn. You should change. Although the scars on your body are very small, it's inappropriate for a woman who should take care of her skin. There's a hot spring in the shop that can be used for treatment. Fei now, you can go there and take a bath. Saying this, White Yiksha's gaze swept past Zhou Yuki, Haruai Biao, and Letitia. In the end, it stopped on Black Rabbit, who had the best figure, and revealed a covetous expression. This is a rare opportunity. The female faction should go and have a peaceful bath together. Seeing White Yiksha's expression, Zhou Yuki, Haruai Biao, Letitia, Black Rabbit, and the other girls all shivered. They felt that it was becoming a bit dangerous. As the saying goes, girls always spend the most time on things like washing up and dressing up. By the time the group of girls came out of the outdoor bathing area, it was already almost an hour later. Everyone changed into kimono-style bathrobes and returned to the living room. Then, as the leader, Ren explained the situation to everyone. The Demon King is attacking. After hearing the whole story, the reaction of the girls was completely different. Jiuisuke and Haruhi Biari's eyes lit up, and they started to get restless. They fully displayed the fearless nature of a problematic child who only wished for the world to be in chaos. Black Rabbit and Letitia were shocked, and the other had a solemn expression. Their reactions were the complete opposite of Zhou Yuki and Haruai Biao's. That was natural. Although it was not to the extent of once bitten, twice shy, the tragic fate of No Name being destroyed by the Demon King lingered in Black Rabbit and Letitia's hearts. Now that they knew that the Demon King would attack the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, how could Black Rabbit and Letitia not be worried? However, the two girls also understood that the time to confront the Demon King again would come. Therefore, whether it was Black Rabbit or Letitia, after being shocked, they calmed down and focused their attention on Noah and 16 Knights. Seeing this, Noah said innocently, "Why are you looking at us?" "Yeah." 16 Knights put her hand on Ren's shoulder. The leader of the community is the little guy, and the countermeasures to deal with the appearance of the Demon King should be decided by the little guy. Hearing Noah and 16 Knights' words, everyone remembered what was going on. It was not that they ignored Ren's position as the leader, but Noah and 16 Knights' influence in the community was greater than the leader, which caused everyone to subconsciously seek their opinions. Ren, who was also well aware of this, did not express any opinions and just said, "We have already reached an agreement with Salamandra, and we will assist in fighting the Demon King." Hearing this, everyone's expression turned serious and they all nodded. Just like this, the night gradually passed. Chapter 13:12. The next day, Noah woke up early from his sleep. He was already dressed. He also washed up with Letitia's help. Noah held the small sword that Aster had transformed into. He brought Letitia out of the room that Thousand Eyes had prepared for him and came to the entrance of the shop. There, led by Byakuya, 16 Knights Reversal, Jiuisuke, Haruai Hiroyuki, and Ren were all ready and waiting for Noah's arrival. "What's wrong, bro? Why are you the last to arrive?" 16 Knights Reversal put one hand in his pocket and looked at Letitia, who was behind Noah. "We don't have a blonde vampire maid to serve us. We woke up earlier than you. It's just the same as usual. I woke up and washed up normally. I didn't intentionally delay or be late. Isn't the timing just right?" Noah replied. "You're not a kid anymore. Are you so excited that you couldn't sleep when you heard that you could participate in the festival the next day? So excited that you couldn't sleep?" 16 Knights Reversal grinned. "You're right. I was so excited that I couldn't sleep." Noah laughed and shook his head, then looked at Jiuisuke. On Jiuisuke's shoulder, the elf with the pointed hat was still there. When she saw Noah looking at her, she immediately hid behind Jiuisuke's hair. Seeing this, Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Jiuisuke. It seems that this little fairy has completely pestered you. Really? Yuasuke had a natural smile on her face. But, it feels good. Yuasuke is surprisingly popular with children, Haruhi Hiroyuki said calmly. She'll definitely be a good mother in the future. Mom. Yuasuke opened her eyes wide and looked at Haruhi Hiroyuki angrily. Haruhi-san. What are you talking about? Haruhi Hiroyuki tilted his head and looked confused. Am I wrong? That's right, that's right. 16 Knights laughed out loud. It's just that eldest miss doesn't seem to have any immunity to the fact that she became a single mother at the age of 15. Yufei glared at reverse 16 Knights. The scene was as noisy as ever, causing Noah to be at a loss whether to laugh or cry. Everyone, please calm down first. Ren quickly comforted them. It's going to be the finale of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Now is not the time to quarrel. Seriously, we might have to face the Demon King's attack today. The black rabbit pulled its long rabbit ears. Why isn't anyone nervous at all? Isn't it good? Letitia smiled. Facing the Demon King, rather than being blindly nervous, it's better to be a little more relaxed. It'll make people feel more at ease. No matter what, our preparations are complete, Noah said faintly. From now on, we'll just have to rely on our strength and a little bit on our fate. Resigned to fate. 16 Knights curled his lips into a smile. Well, it's not bad to come once in a while. Not bad is not bad, but I don't want to leave the lives of so many people in the outer sect to be decided by the heavens. White Yiksha looked around at everyone with an unprecedentedly serious expression. So, I'll leave it to you. Noah and the others immediately nodded. Just like that, the group set off and headed to the venue of the gift game hosted by Shadora. On the boundary wall between the eastern and northern districts, there was a tunnel that was specially dug out from a huge rock wall. This tunnel led to a gaming venue. The gaming venue had a circular outline. The audience seats were set up along the outline, showing the ancient Roman Colosseum that surrounded the venue. And in the center of the venue, there was a high platform. Black Rabbit, who was wearing a provocative miniskirt, held a microphone in her hand. Its function was no different from a microphone. She came to the center of the high platform and smiled at the audience seats that were divided into a circle. Sorry for the long wait. The main gift game of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony is about to begin. The host and referee will be Thousand Eyes exclusive referee. I, Black Rabbit, will be in charge of serving everyone. Everyone, please give me your advice. Under Black Rabbit's familiar introduction and smile, a wave of loud cheers mixed with strange roars sounded around the audience seats. The sound frequency that caused the entire venue to shake resounded through the sky. You too. You too is really here. I'm here especially for Rabbit. Please perform well. Hakata aristocrat. Let us take a peek at the scenery under your skirt. Amazing enthusiasm and loud cheers reverberated throughout the entire venue. Although the Black Rabbit still had a smile on its face, its rabbit ears were trembling, and it seemed to be a little scared. Amidst the deafening cheers, at the front of the venue, on the balcony of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony's operation headquarters, Noah and the others sat there as VIPs under Shadora's special arrangement. Looking at the shockingly enthusiastic audience seats, Kiyoshi Asuka and Haruhi Biao's expressions were stiff and disdainful. Black Rabbit is really popular. Although I don't envy her at all, while the two girls looked at the audience who were extremely excited because of Black Rabbit's provocative miniskirt with disdain, 16 Knights and Byakuya were also looking at the scenery under Black Rabbit's skirt with binoculars. Even Letitia couldn't stand it anymore. Master. Letitia sighed as if she couldn't stand it. You have thousands of Godhead gifts. Do you have any gift that can help your companions return to the right path? Even I feel that this request is too difficult. Noah also sighed and looked at Black Rabbit on the stage. By the way, why did you suddenly let Black Rabbit be the referee? It wasn't Letitia who answered this question, but Byakuya. I officially asked Black Rabbit to be the referee and host of the game. Byakuya didn't even take down the binoculars in his hand. He peeked at Black Rabbit on the stage with relish and explained as he watched. The news of Rabbit's arrival at the Fire Dragon's birthday ceremony has already spread. Many people are looking forward to Black Rabbit's appearance in the Game of Blessings as a referee. Furthermore, the game has the Hakata nobles as the game's referee, so the rules of the game have an inviolable legitimacy. Whether it goes against the audience's expectations to hype up the atmosphere of the ceremony or to normalize the game, having Black Rabbit appear as the referee is a beneficial and harmless thing. Is that so? Noah nodded thoughtfully. However, since the game needs to be legitimate and Shadora has to personally watch the battle, then this gift game is indeed very large-scale, right? It's considered the finale of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Byakuya continued. Before this, there was also a selection competition to select the players to participate in this gift game. As a result, among the communities that qualified to participate, there were even communities that established bases in the outer sect with a 6-digit number. A community with a 6-digit number. Noah was surprised. Why would the communities on the upper level participate in the game held by the outer sect on the lower level? They probably want to get the reward from the ruler of the level, right? Letitia said. Although it's a game held at the lowest level, the organizers are Thousand Eyes and Salamandra. It's not surprising that the prize can attract a community with a 6-digit number. Noah nodded in understanding. At this time, Haruhibu Yaichi, who had sharp 5 senses, noticed something strange. He raised his head and looked at the sky. Then, his eyes widened and he exclaimed. What is that? Hearing this, everyone was startled and raised their heads to look at the sky. Then, everyone saw it. Pieces of black parchment fell from the sky like feathers. Riding the wind, they slowly floated down from the sky. Looking at the pieces of black parchment floating down, Noah furrowed his brows. Those are black contract documents. Chapter 13:13. In the air above the boundary wall between the 3,999,999 outer gate at the border of the Eastern District and the 4 million outer gate at the border of the Northern District, 4 figures were standing at a height of about 2,000 meters above the protruding boundary wall. There were 4 figures of completely different sizes. The one standing on the left was a woman in her 20s. She was wearing a revealing white dress, had platinum hair, and was emitting a seductive aura. She was holding a long flute in her hand. The one standing on the right was a muscular man wearing a black military uniform. He had short black hair, and carried a long flute as thick as a stick on his shoulder. The one standing at the back had a smooth appearance made of a material similar to pottery. Many ventilation holes were dug out all over its body, making it look like a huge anthropomorphic flute with a length of more than 50 feet. There was also a huge ventilation hole on its face, making it seem like a puppet. As for the one standing at the front, she was a petite girl around 12 or 13 years old. She was wearing a black and white patterned dress and snow boots. These 4 figures with completely different temperaments, appearances, and auras stood in a slanted square on the high boundary wall, looking down below. Their gazes landed on the location where the Fire Dragon birth ceremony was held. Looking at the venue that was filled with deafening cheers that could be heard even from more than 2,000 meters away, the seductive woman twirled the flute in her hand and said in disdain or envy. A disaster is about to befall us, and they are still happily holding a ceremony. What's wrong, Latina? Lotting? The robust man glanced at the other party. Do you want to participate as well? If there's someone who can make me happy, then it's not impossible to consider, Wells. The woman named Ladding smiled sweetly. It's just that, in that place, the only people who are qualified to be our opponents should be Salamandra, the little girl who has just been promoted to the position of the class leader, and the terrifying Sun Star spirit in the Eastern District, right? Did you forget that you met those little girls when you were controlling the rats yesterday? Will narrowed his eyes. Among them, there are nobles and pure-blooded vampires. That short-haired girl doesn't seem to be an ordinary person either. In addition, there's that elf who's guarding the pointy hat. She has some beads in her hand, but she's hesitant to use them. It's obvious that she's hiding some trump card. Don't be careless. We do need to be careful of purebred vampires. Hakata nobles can't casually participate in games, even if it's the Demon King's gift game, so there's nothing to worry about. Lading raised her eyebrows slightly. As for those two little girls, I don't think there's anything special about them. It's just that you're thinking too much. There's nothing wrong with being careful, Weishi said noncommittally. No matter what, in such a large outer sect and such a lively ceremony, it's not strange for 2 or 3 opponents to appear that we need to be serious about. That's true. La Ting nodded in agreement, but then she looked at the petite girl standing at the front with a happy smile. But, with Master here, there shouldn't be a problem, right? Hearing this, the young girl standing in front, wearing a black and white patterned dress, raised her delicate face that was completely emotionless, and announced with a monotonous voice. Let's begin. Hearing the girl's voice, whether it was Weishi or La Ting, both showed a cruel smile. Yes. My master. On the other side, in the venue where the fire dragon's birth ceremony was held, all the spectators stopped cheering and looked at the black parchments falling from the sky with blank expressions. Those parchments were like pieces of black feathers, lightly floating down. Noah, 16 Knights, Zhou Yu Fei Niao, and Haruai Buyao looked at the pieces of black parchment that were floating down. Their eyes gradually narrowed. Because those were contract documents. The necessary gift to hold the gift game. However, in the months since they came here, whether it was Noah, 16 Knights Reverse, Joe Yuki, or Haruai Hikari, they had never seen a black contract document. That ominous color was simply a representation of the word abnormal in reality. It's actually a black contract document. White Yiksha suddenly stood up from his seat. That's the Demon King's contract document. When the word Demon King entered the ears of Noah and the others almost simultaneously reached out their hands and caught the black contract document floating in front of them. It was a contract document with a seal with a picture of a clown playing a flute. It was written on the contract document. Gift game name, the Pied Piper of Hamelin participant list, 39999999 Outer Gate and 40000000 Outer Gate Realm Stage Area are the community of all participants and organizers. Designated Game Leader, Sun's Traveler, Stars White Yiksha. Organizers Victory Condition, subdue and kill all participants. Participants Victory Condition 1, defeat the organizer's game leader. Participants Victory Condition 2, break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance. Pledge, respect the above content, based on the honor, flag, and organizer's authority, hold the gift game. Grim Grimoire Hamelin Seal. When the contents of the black contract document were revealed to the audience one by one, the stage fell into a deathly silence. What broke the deathly silence was a heart-wrenching scream from who knows where in the audience. The demon. The Demon King has appeared. Accompanied by such a heart-wrenching scream, panic suddenly filled the entire space. Ah! The blood-curdling screams turned into sound waves that reverberated throughout the entire space. In the audience, one by one, the audience began to flee in panic as if they had encountered a fire. Calm down. Shadora stood up from her seat and yelled in a panic. Everyone, calm down. All right, Shadora, it doesn't matter how loud you shout. Those who are running for their lives won't be able to hear you. Noah turned around and looked at Shadora. Hurry up and organize Salamandra to evacuate the crowd. Yes. Yes. Shadora quickly responded and looked at Mandela. However, at this time, Mandela was already giving orders to the surrounding Salamandra members. Hurry up and evacuate the crowd. Yes. After the response, the Salamandra members began to jump off the stage and went to the audience to evacuate the crowd. Damn it. White Yiksha's face sank fiercely and his whole body exuded a terrifying aura. How dare you act so brazenly, I will never let you go. Before he could finish his sentence, a gust of black wind suddenly swept up in the space around Bayasha. Like a pitch-black fog, it completely enveloped Bayasha. Everyone present, including Noah, was shocked. It was also at this moment that the black wind swirling around White Yiksha suddenly expanded. Bang! The violent impact shook the surroundings, and the people on the balcony of the operation headquarters were all sent flying. 16 knights in Mandela, who were shocked by the sudden impact, reacted in time, turned around, stabilized their bodies, and landed steadily on the ground. Haruai Hiroyuki and Letitia also reacted. One was surrounded by a whirlwind, while the other had a pair of shadow-like black wings on her back, floating in the air. Only Joyuan Flying Bird protected the elf with the pointy hat in his arms. He closed his eyes and fell down with a look of resignation. Until a warm embrace embraced Kori Hiroyuki. Kori Hiroyuki quickly opened her eyes and let out a sigh of relief. Noah. Noah. However, Noah did not respond to Kori Hiroyuki's call. He gently raised his eyes and looked at the sky. Over there, several figures slowly descended. Chapter 13-14. Looking at the few figures descending from the sky, everyone held their breaths. Although it hadn't been confirmed yet, and they couldn't even see the figure's body clearly, everyone present had a resonance in their hearts almost at the same time. Among those people, there was definitely the Demon King who would attack this time. After causing panic and then descending from the sky like a high and mighty figure. Reverse 16 Knights stared closely at the few figures in the distance, and with a very happy expression, shouted happily. Not bad, not bad. Really not bad. This is the Demon King who brings disaster and fear. Bastard. With an insolent smile, Reverse 16 Knights, who was filled with excitement and joy, had a rare moment of hot-headedness. He crouched down, and like a cannonball, with a bang, he set off an astonishing shock-wave and violently shot towards the boundary wall. No one had time to stop Reverse 16 Knights, who was charging with the speed of the third universe, and the existence that violated the rules burst out, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. That idiot! Zhou Yuao subconsciously hugged Noah's neck, and said somewhat angrily. He actually acted on his own accord. Noah also frowned, and felt somewhat helpless in his heart. Reverse 16 Knights, at first glance, looked like a bad person, but in fact, he was a real smart person, and the knowledge and wisdom in his head was not below Noah's. However, compared to Noah, Reverse 16 Knights was less steady and calm, and more arrogant and unscrupulous. Therefore, this guy would also be loyal to his heart, and when passion and enthusiasm appeared in his heart, he would never deliberately suppress it, and would even do things regardless of the consequences. Although Noah felt that when it was time to be calm, Reverse 16 Knights would definitely remain calm, but in a situation where there was no need to be calm, this guy was just a hot-headed problem child. So, Noah landed on the ground, and put down Zhou Yuao in his arms. At the same time, Haruhito Hikari and Letitia also landed from mid-air. Master. Letitia looked at Noah with an unprecedentedly serious expression. Now, what should we do? Now, most of the people from Salamandra are evacuating the crowd. I think only Shadora and Mandela can move freely. You guys should move with them, Noah said fluently without the slightest hesitation. Those two should be confirming the abnormality that happened to White Yiksha, so as to avoid encountering such an unknown method in the battle with the Demon King. Therefore, you should also confirm White Yiksha's situation. As long as we can release White Yiksha, we will be no different from victory. What about you? Haruhibu Yaichi looked at Noah. What do you plan to do? Our opponent is the Demon King. How can we let that problem child act on her own? Noah smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then, the corners of his mouth slowly lifted to an unnoticeable angle. Besides, it's not like I'm not interested in that so-called Demon King. Leaving this sentence, Noah's figure turned into a stream of light and directly rushed in the direction of the boundary wall. Only then did Koyuki, Haruhito Hikari, and Letitia look at each other, nodded, and ran in the direction of White Yiksha. At the same time, Will and Lading jumped down from the high boundary wall and landed on the ground far away. Above the two of them, the petite girl riding on the head of the puppet that seemed to be made of ceramic was also following the gravitational pull, continuously descending. The plan of the group was very simple. None of the people here were interested in the people who were fleeing in panic. Therefore, the group planned to directly go to the stage in front of the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony and meet those who could be called their opponents in this game. This plan was mercilessly dispelled after 0.1 seconds. Shio dash. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound, a figure soared into the sky like a rocket. With a terrifying speed that surpassed the speed of the third universe, it violently shot in front of Will and Lading who were in the vanguard. No. To be more precise, it should be said that it violently shot in front of Will. Shio dash. Will's expression changed. He only had time to do this before a face with an arrogant smile was imprinted in Will's eyes. We finally meet. 16 Knights Reversal grinned, his eyes bursting with a dense light. Lord Demon King. As soon as the words fell, a fist carrying a terrifying force was like a meteor that heavily bombarded Will's abdomen. Bang! A shocking muffled sound reverberated. Go! Wei Shuai let out a bitter cry. His entire body was like a cannonball, rubbing against the air. Amidst the sound of breaking air, he heavily smashed into the tall boundary wall. Wei Shi! Lading cried out in alarm and quickly stopped herself, floating in midair. As for the petite girl riding on Tao Bing, she stared at 16 knights, who had sent Wei Shi flying with a single punch. Her eyes flickered with interest. To be able to send Will flying, this man seems to have some ability. Unfortunately, no matter how capable 16 Knights was, he was just a human. Of course, none of the humans had wings. 16 Knights, who flew over without considering the consequences, could only follow the gravity and descend. The solution to this predicament was a wave of wind. A gust of wind and waves swept up without any warning. The wind and waves surrounded Reverse 16 Knights, and Reverse 16 Knights slowly floated up, stopping him from falling. Is this the wind of the Kasuga tribe? 16 Knights stood up in surprise, then shook his head. No, the wind of the Kasuga tribe is different from this. Did little brother come up with some interesting method? That's right. The wind that surrounded Reverse 16 Knights was precisely the magic that Noah had used on Reverse 16 Knights after tearing open a third-grade scroll of the normal gale. Seeing this scene, the girl in the patterned dress eyes flashed slightly, then she turned her head and looked behind her. Over there, Noah was floating in the air. His gaze shot over and met the young girl's gaze. Everyone suddenly fell silent. 16 Knights felt as if he could control the wind around him with his will. Thus, he controlled his body and flew to Noah's side, standing side by side with Noah and giggling. I say, little brother, you already have 2 Lolita maids at home. You should be satisfied. It's better not to stare at the spotted Lolita over there from the start, right? Noah almost fell to the ground. At this moment, Wei Shi, who had been sent flying by 16 knights, flew back and looked at 16 knights with a ruthless gaze. Damn brat. Will. La Ting floated beside Wei Shi. Together with Wei Shi, they stood side by side in front of the petite girl riding on the huge terracotta soldier as if they were going to confront Noah and 16 knights. You are too careless, aren't you? You better be careless. Will spat out a mouthful of saliva. That brat. No, those two brats are not ordinary people. No matter which one it is, I didn't notice them until they came close. Me too. La Ting said helplessly. It seems like you are right. There are 2 or 3 opponents that we need to deal with seriously. That's a good thing. Will suddenly smiled. This way, our actions will have meaning. Noah and reverse 16 knights narrowed their eyes when they saw Will and La Ting talking to each other as if there was no one else around. Then, they looked at the petite girl who was riding on the giant terracotta soldier. It was obvious that she was being protected by Will and La Ting. Then, 16 knights turned around and glanced at Noah with a displeased look. It seems like the person who made the right choice is you. Reverse 16 knights' attack was Weezer. However, Will was not the demon king. As soon as Noah appeared, he only had eyes for the petite girl. Therefore, 16 knights said that Noah made the right choice. He chose the one with the biggest head. Under such circumstances, the petite girl smiled casually and opened her arms. Her voice echoed between heaven and earth. Come and play. Chapter 13-15. Let's play. Following this sentence, which sounded like a playful and willful little girl, the atmosphere of the entire space suddenly changed. Noah and 16 knights narrowed their eyes at the same time. The petite girl riding on the huge terracotta soldier opened her hand, and a strange black wind suddenly gushed out from the sleeve of her patterned dress. It was like a darkness formed by dense black locusts, and like a fog, it filled the entire space. Whether it was Noah or 16 knights, they both intuitively confirmed one thing. That gust of black wind was definitely not something simple. Before the game starts, let's ask. The petite girl opened her hands and let the black wind gush out from her sleeves. She looked condescendingly at Noah and 16 knights, and after a while, she opened her red lips. What are your names? Hearing this, Noah didn't have time to speak. 16 knights seemed to be dissatisfied with the petite girl's high and mighty attitude. He revealed an insufferably arrogant smile. Before asking for someone's name, you have to tell them your name first. This is the most basic etiquette, speckled lowly. Etiquette. The petite girl's tone became somewhat sarcastic. You didn't even say hello before punching someone else's subordinate. Is it appropriate for you to talk about etiquette? This should be considered the same, right? Noah looked up and stared at the petite girl. Attacking someone while they are happily holding a festival is no longer a matter of etiquette, but a matter of whether it's reasonable or not. There's no other way. The petite girl said this without any change in her emotions. After all, I'm the demon king. The moment she finished speaking, the black wind that filled the entire space like a fog suddenly exploded, and like a violent wave, it rushed in the direction of Noah and 16 knights. Seeing this, the arrogant smile on 16 knights' face became slightly ferocious. Don't be so arrogant. After he finished speaking, 16 knights went against the black wind and kicked out a kick that carried a whistling chi. Bang! Under the kick of 16 knights, the black wind that surged forth like a violent wave directly exploded. W.H. La Ting gasped. Hey. Wei Shi was also shocked. Are you kidding? Not to mention Wei Shi and La Ting, even the petite girl was stunned for a moment and said in surprise. He broke the gift with a kick. In this box were all kinds of Asura gods and Buddhas gathered. it was not rare to see a gift that could nullify a gift. However, this was only limited to gift armaments that strengthened a single ability, that is, gift armaments that could only be materialized in the form of weapons and so on. The reason was simple. Since a gift that could nullify a gift was effective on a gift, then whether it was one's own gift or another's gift, it would have an effect on all of them. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the gifts that could nullify a gift were external objects in the form of weapons, tools, and so on. They could not belong to the individual. After all, different from the gift of a materialized weapon, the gift of an individual was a part of the soul. If that gift was a gift that could nullify a gift, then this person would not be able to obtain another gift in his life. Even if he obtained another gift, it would be directly erased by his own gift that could nullify a gift. In other words, if it was a gift of a weapon, it would be fine. But if someone had a gift that could nullify a gift, but there were other gifts, this was a contradiction in itself. And 16 Nights, as a human who did not have any special ability, but he could rush over at the speed of the third universe and send Wei Shi flying with a punch, it proved that 16 Nights had a gift that could provide a powerful physical strength. That gift was the gift of shatter the heavens and earth. In other words, 16 Nights made shatter the heavens and earth and power to shatter the gift at the same time. He had a powerful gift, but at the same time, he had the power to nullify the gift. Such a huge contradiction was the reason why others were shocked. What? Is this enough to surprise you? 16 Nights Reversal laughed arrogantly and uncontrollably. Hey! Cheer up. You are the Demon King. After saying this, Reverse 16 Nights stomped on the air. Space trembled, and a turbulent current appeared. His entire body was like a bullet fired from a gun. With the speed of the third universe, he charged in the direction of the petite girl. Oh no! Wei Shi and La Ting, who were still in shock, couldn't react in time. 16 Nights directly passed the two of them and rushed toward the petite girl at an astonishing speed that caused the atmosphere to become chaotic. Only then did the petite girl react. Her delicate and pretty face returned to its emotionless state, and she softly called. Shout Rom. The huge Tao Bing, who had been quietly floating in the air, suddenly raised its head with a huge ventilation hole, and suddenly opened its flute-like hand that was also covered with ventilation holes. Buzz! At this moment, the atmosphere in the surrounding space was crazily sucked into the huge Tao Bing, and the ventilation holes on its body were suddenly released. Whoosh! Violent atmospheric vortexes gushed out from the ventilation holes on Tao Bing's body, turning into ferocious shockwaves that spread out in all directions. Reverse 16 Nights, who was charging in the direction of the petite girl, was caught off guard by the violent atmospheric vortex and was blown away without any ability to resist. Looking at the Reverse 16th Night who was blown away, the petite girl gently smiled. She raised one of her hands and a strange black wind burst out from her long sleeves. It turned into a turbulent current and rushed towards the direction of the Reverse 16th Night. 16 Nights couldn't help but be speechless, but he still kicked the incoming black wind with force. Bang! With a muffled explosion, the incoming black wind was once again shattered by 16 Nights' kick. However, the powerful force of the black wind wasn't neutralized, and it made 16 Nights fly back at an even faster speed. It didn't take long for him to disappear from everyone's sight. The petite girl standing on the huge terracotta soldier named Shutram lowered her hand and spoke with an expressionless face. Chase after him. Yes. Will and Lading responded without any hesitation. Their bodies turned into arrows that left the bowstring, and flew in the direction where 16 Nights disappeared. After Will and Lading disappeared, the petite girl turned her head and looked at Noah, who had been silently observing from the side, and asked curiously. Why didn't you attack with your companions? If that's the case, that guy will probably blame me for disturbing his hard-earned enjoyment, right? Noah shrugged. Moreover, the game has just begun. Why are you in such a hurry? Aren't you in a hurry? The petite girl narrowed her eyes. Your game leader is trapped by me, and I don't know when something will happen. Even so, aren't you in a hurry? I say, aren't you underestimating White Yiksha too much? Noah looked at the petite girl with a smile that wasn't a smile. Even if the heavenly shaking theory is gradually being denied, and the spirit lattice is constantly shrinking, White Yiksha is still a top 10 powerhouse. Up until now, who knows how many Asuras, gods, and Buddhas couldn't do anything to her. A demon king that came out of nowhere wants to defeat her. Don't tell me you're new here. The expression on the petite girl's face began to sink. Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows. Looks like I guessed right. You really are a new demon king. The petite girl didn't admit or deny it. She only looked at Noah with a new gaze. After a while, she asked, "What's your name?" It was the same question as before. Facing this question, Noah looked at the petite girl with a meaningful gaze and suddenly smiled. My name is Noah. Please take care of me, Miss Pest. The petite girl's expression finally changed for the first time. Chapter 13:16. Pest. When Noah mentioned the name of this petite girl with spotted patterns, the way the girl looked at Noah completely changed. All sorts of emotions started to flash through her eyes. There was surprise. There was doubt. There was confusion. There was doubt. All sorts of emotions flashed through the girl named Pest's eyes one after another, causing her to forget how to react. Pest's reaction was the highest level of affirmation to Noah's words. In other words, my guess is correct again. Pest finally reacted to Kiran's words. Pest's eyes gradually narrowed as she stared intently at Noah. Why? Why do I know your name? Asked Noah as he met Pest's gaze. Because I've almost gathered all the information I need. As he said that, Noah took out the contract sealed with the picture of a clown playing the flute. Bestowed game name, the Pied Piper of Hamelin, participant list, 3999999 outer sect and 4000000 outer sect realm wall stage area are a community of all participants and organizers. Designated game leaders, Sun's Traveler, Stars White Yiksha. Organizers victory condition, subdue and kill all the participants. Participants victory condition 1, defeat the organizer's game leader. Participants victory condition 2, break the fake inheritance and establish the true inheritance. Oath, respect the above content and hold the bestowed game based on the honor, flag and organizer's authority. Grim Gimel Hamun, seal. Holding up the black contract, Noah slowly opened his mouth. The name of the game is the Pied Piper of Hamelin, which means the Pied Piper of Hamel. I think that when you see the name of the game, most people already understand that the Pied Piper of Hamel mentioned here should be that famous fairy tale, right? The Pied Piper of Hamelin. It was one of the fairy tales that originated from Grimm. Speaking of this fairy tale, there was one thing that had to be mentioned. That was the basis of this story. In Grimm's fairy tales, there were several stories that quoted real history for research. The Pied Piper of Hamel was one of them. The Hamel mentioned in the story was the town where the story took place. In the history of this town, there had been a large number of cases of children suddenly disappearing. Because of this case, there is even an inscription in the town of Hamel. This inscription was the prototype of Grimm's fairy tale, the Pied Piper of Hamel. This was what was recorded in the inscription. On the 26th of June 1284, on the anniversary of John and Paul, 130 children born in Hamel were lured out by the piper in colorful clothes and disappeared at the execution ground near the hills. This inscription was a true story that had happened in Hamel, and it was displayed together with a piece of stained glass. It was because of this inscription that one of Grimm's fairy tales, the Pied Piper of Hamel, was born. After the 16th century, this incident was adapted into a fairy tale. Among them, the piper was shaped into the image of a rat-catcher. In the fairy tale, there was a rat infestation in Hamel, and the villagers of Hamel commissioned a rat-catcher to come and eliminate the rats that were wreaking havoc in the town. When they arrived at the town of Hamel, the rat-catcher took out a magic flute and blew it. The rats that heard the flute were all controlled by the rat-catcher. They were all lured to the execution ground near the hills and drowned in the Wacy River. However, after the commission was completed, the villagers of Hamel broke their promise and did not pay the rat-catcher, so he left angrily. On St. John and Paul's Day, which was the 26th of June, when the villagers gathered in the church to commemorate St. John and Paul, the rat-catcher appeared again and played his flute. This time, the rat-catchers used their flute music to lure away 130 children and took them away. From then on, whether it was the rat-catcher who played the flute or the children who were lured away, there was no news of them. This was the story of the Pied Piper of Hamel, and it was also an adaptation of a disappearance that had happened in the past. Most scholars believe that the story of the Pied Piper reflected an incident that caused a large number of children to die at a certain point in Hamel's history. There could be two reasons for the deaths of these children. One was a natural disaster. Due to the storm, a landslide occurred in the hills, or the flooding of the Wacy River near the execution ground, causing a mudslide and causing the deaths of 130 children. The other was the Black Death. It was one of the most serious plagues in human history that spread throughout Europe in the 1340s, in the 14th century. The name of the game is the Pied Piper of Hamel, and one of the conditions for the contestants to win is break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance. In this box with all kinds of myths and legends as inheritances, one cannot help but wonder if you are related to that fairy tale. Noah looked directly at Pest and explained with conviction. Moreover, among your companions, there is a woman called Ratten. In German, Ratten refers to rat-catchers. In German, Ratten refers to rat-catchers. In addition, there is another man called Wacy. His name is reminiscent of the Wacy River. You also called that Taubing-Sturm. In German, storm means storm. Rat-catchers, Wacy River, storm. These three keywords all appeared in the Pied Piper of Hamel. As for you, the black wind you used earlier should be the virus of the Black Death, right? Noah sneered. The Black Death disease is pestis in Latin. It represents the plague. In that case, it shouldn't be strange for me to guess that your name is Pestis, right? Hearing those words, Pest grew silent. However, if one were to carefully observe her, one would discover that this young demon king was looking at Noah with an interested gaze. You're called Noah, right? Pest said to Noah with a somewhat childish voice. Hey, Noah, do you want to join my community? Noah was immediately startled. After exposing Pest's true name, Noah had imagined all sorts of reactions Pest might have. However, Pest's sudden attempt to recruit him was something that Noah did not expect. That said, this was not the first time that Noah was being recruited. Thus, he would not lose his sense of propriety because of something like this. Thus, Noah said, "Give me a reason to join you all." Is there a reason? Pest smiled. That was a smile that did not resemble a young girl at all. It was a smile that gave off a malicious feeling. Then, Pest said those words. In that case, what if I were to tell you that if you don't join us, I will kill everyone in this outer court? Those words caused the smile on Noah's face to gradually disappear. It was replaced by a frightening calmness. You can give it a try. At this moment, Pest was able to clearly sense it. An aura that caused one's heart to palpitate flashed through Noah's body for an instant. Right when Pest was frowning because of this, something unexpected happened. Rumble. Accompanied by a loud bang, a huge bolt of lightning suddenly exploded in a corner. This lightning bolt caused all of the 4 million outer court disciples that were playing the Demon King's gift game to stop what they were doing. They raised their heads and looked toward the origin of the lightning and thunder. At that place, at the top of a minaret, Black Rabbit was holding up a Vajra scepter flickering with lightning. The request to activate the trial authority has been accepted. Next, the gift game The Pied Piper of Hamelin will be temporarily suspended. Both the participants and the organizer are to stop fighting each other and quickly prepare for negotiations. Both parties, please prepare to participate in the upcoming deliberation and decision. Chapter 13-17. Between the 39999999 outer gate and the 40000000 outer gate, the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. In the middle of a large hall that resembled a meeting room, a group of people sat across from each other across a long square table. There were a total of 3 communities present. No name, Salamandra, Grim Gimel Hamon. The first community was represented by Benevolence and Reversal 16 Knights. The second community was represented by Shadora and Mandora. The third community was represented by Pest, Will, and Latting. The 7 people sat on both sides of the square table, forming a confrontation. As for Black Rabbit, she was presiding over this discussion as the referee. Because of the problem of seating, Noah, Jiu Yuanfei, and Haruhito Hikari stood side by side in front of the wall next to the entrance. Looking at the 3 communities that were facing each other with a heavy atmosphere, Joyuan Bird lowered his voice and asked Noah, who was leaning against the wall with his eyes closed. No one knew what he was thinking about. Speaking of which, what is this discussion about? It's one of the rights granted to the game's adjudicator who has the right to adjudicate, Noah answered without even opening his eyes. Using this right, the game can be temporarily stopped and a meeting can be held to confirm whether or not the rules of the game created based on the organizer's authority have any imperfections. Haruhito Hikari approached Noah and stood shoulder to shoulder with Noah. Similarly, he lowered his voice and asked, "There are imperfections in the rules. In other words, there are imperfections in this game." "It's precisely because we can't be certain that we need to hold a meeting," Noah corrected him. "However, this can't be considered the true purpose of this discussion." Not the true purpose of this discussion. Jiu Yuanfei no longer cared about the difference between men and women. Like Haruhito Hikari, she approached Noah and stood shoulder to shoulder with Noah. "What do you mean?" "Because this authority can forcefully stop the game of bestowment that has already started, it also has a layer of meaning to fight against the Demon King who often launches surprise attacks." Noah explained. Like this time, one of the winning conditions for the bestowment game is to break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance. What does this mean? We need time to think about it. If we think about it during the battle with the Demon King, then the difficulty won't just be doubled. Simply put, it's the same as calling for a halt. Haruhibu Yaori nodded with some admiration. That's really a useful authority. The problem is, the other party definitely knows the significance of the existence of this authority. Noah opened his eyes and looked at the expressionless Pest. That's because the deliberations are used to confirm whether the rules of the game are incomplete. In the meeting, no matter what the outcome is, it becomes possible to reformulate the rules of the game. Jiu Fei Niao was stunned for a moment before he understood. "You mean that the other party might propose rules that are beneficial to them?" "That's exactly what I mean," Noah's eyes flickered slightly. "So, now it's just a question of who is faster. Would the participants solve the winning conditions of the game of bestowment first? Or would the organizer obtain the advantageous conditions first?" Based on the upcoming meeting, the situation might completely tilt in favor of one of the 2 parties. This was the reason why Noah didn't take a seat. For the negotiation, it was enough to have Ren and Ni Hui 16th Night. The mission Noah gave himself was to solve the winning conditions of break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance as quickly as possible. If my guess is correct, Pest, Weezer, Radin, and Storm should all be demons born from the inheritance of Hamel's Pied Piper. They were existences that were spiritualized by using 130 children as living sacrifices. With achievements, there would be inheritances. With inheritances, there would be spiritualities. Based on this, Noah believed that Pest, Weezer, Radin, and Storm should all be demons that were born from Hamel's Pied Piper after obtaining their spiritualities through the achievement of causing the deaths of 130 children. As for the deaths of 130 children, there are also a lot of speculations. So, break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance should mean that we must find out the truth behind the deaths, right? All of a sudden, Noah fell into deep thought. While Noah was deep in thought, the deliberations of the deliberations quietly began. The first to speak was Shadora. I never would have thought that Grim Gimmel still exists. Shadora looked at Pest with a sharp gaze. You shouldn't be the demon king that originally led Grim Gimmel, right? Pest met Shadora's gaze but turned her head away disdainfully, causing a trace of anger to appear in Shadora's eyes. Feeling a little strange, 16th Knights turned her head and asked Mandela in a low voice. What's wrong? Is the community Grim Grimoire Hameln very famous? Grim Grimoire Hameln is a community led by the Demon King. Mandela closed his eyes. That Demon King was a Demon King that once summoned demons from over 200 magic books. He used demons as the lifeline of the community. However, after that Demon King lost to a certain community in a game of grace, he should have passed away. I see, 16 Knights nodded in understanding. Is that why you think that the spotted lowly isn't the Demon King that originally led Grim Gimmel? Noah, who was leaning against the wall, also heard this. He more or less came to a realization. If that was the case, perhaps Pest, Weezer, Radin and Storm were all demons summoned by that Demon King from the Pied Piper of Hamel. Wait. Noah suddenly had a thought. Are all four of them really the Demon King? This was a question that was only natural. Weezer and Radin aside, Pest and Storm were not existences that only appeared in the Pied Piper of Hamel. What if Pest and Storm were not demons summoned from the Pied Piper of Hamel? Then these two people have nothing to do with the legacy of the Pied Piper of Hamel. Noah's mind was filled with countless thoughts. If that's the case, the meaning of break the false legacy and establish the true legacy is clear. No. He didn't just understand this question. If that was the case, the rest of the questions would be answered as well. The true nature of this bestowment game organized by Pest gradually took shape in Noah's mind. And at this moment, the negotiation began. Let me make this clear. There are no flaws in the rules of the game this time. Pest spoke with a resolute and decisive tone. As the organizer of this game, we are currently being wronged. And you all have interfered with the sacred game. I demand compensation. Just as Noah expected, Pest planned to change the rules of the game to her advantage during the meeting. Ren, who was well aware of this, forced himself to calm down and raised his objection in a low voice. But Lord White Yiksha, who was appointed as the leader of the game, was sealed by an unknown method. Is that still considered proper behavior? Of course. Including White Yiksha's seal, there are no flaws in the rules of the game this time, Pest said in an extremely calm manner. Didn't you say that you two's rabbit ears are connected to the core of the box court? Even if I lie, I will be immediately exposed, right? Everyone was speechless. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.